When we think of Acts chapter 1 and verse 8, we think of this challenging assignment that the apostles were given. And we can only just imagine them thinking about the other promise of power and Holy Spirit being with them. They certainly would need that to go to the most distant part of the earth. When we think back to the first century, we think of ones such as the Apostle Paul, Barnabas, Timothy, and many others who literally tried to go as far as they could to reach various territories. And if we take our Bibles and turn to the book of Romans, chapter 15 and verses 23 and 24, we see summarized here the Apostle Paul's viewpoint with regard to this. Romans 15:23, but now I no longer have untouched territory in these regions, and for many years I have longed to come to you. And that's the brothers in Rome. Therefore, when I journey to Spain, I hope that I will see you. So Paul was very concerned about going to untouched territories. Well, in recent times, we can say the same is true of Jehovah's people, whether it be the Gilead missionaries who have been sent out, or other missionaries even prior to the time of Gilead being established, or we think of the brothers who have moved to other countries to serve where the need is greater, or perhaps those that have gone out to unassigned territories or helped in areas where very few people get the opportunity to hear the message. When we hear those experiences, we certainly are encouraged by them, aren't we? But perhaps we could think this morning about just one of the aspects of the history in the past. It's something referred to in the March 2016 Watchtower, the question from readers. You remember this was discussing the Valley of Dry Bones in Ezekiel 37. It spoke about the gradual restoration of true worship. And it made the comment there that in the scriptures it speaks of a rattling noise. And the Watchtower made this comment. It said, even prior to the time of the end, there were some faithful individuals who stood up in behalf of true worship. And then it says some of them endeavored to produce Bibles in the languages of the common people. So let's just think for a few moments about some of those, perhaps less than 100 years before the time that Brother Russell started the Watchtower, how many of these were motivated to go to distant parts of the earth to translate the Bible and help others there. For example, in the year 1793, a man by the name of William Carey was a British shoemaker. And this shoemaker was very impressed with the words recorded in Matthew 28:19 and 20. He felt strongly that all Christians should follow that command. So his goal was to go to India. And he arrived in India, faced all sorts of problems. Eventually his wife died, his son died as well. He had to take a job planting indigo. But this man, within 21 years, with the help of some others, was able to translate the Bible, or parts of it, in 36 languages. Then in 1797, another man, Henry Nott, from England, was a bricklayer, and he and quite a number of others arrived in Tahiti. Now, 4 of those in that ship were noted to be pastors, but they had no formal training whatsoever. Now, Henry Nott hadn't had a very good education. He was a bricklayer. He just had the basic education. But this very faithful man decided to learn Hebrew and Greek and translate the Bible into Tahitian. And he learned Tahitian very quickly. And in 1835, after 30 years of translating, it says he put down his quill and the Tahitian Bible, which incidentally uses Jehovah's name in both the Hebrew and the Greek sections of the Bible. Then 1807, Robert Morrison, a man who was determined to translate the Bible into Chinese. He arrived in China to find out that if anyone taught a foreigner Chinese, there was a death penalty. So he remained indoors for a couple of years while he learned the Chinese language. And then when he started to translate the Bible, he found out the emperor had stated there would be a death penalty for anyone who printed Christian literature in that country. Well, in 1819, Morrison completed his version there of the Bible. 1812, Judson, an American, along with his wife, left America just after 2 weeks of marriage. And in 1813 arrived in Burma, which is now known as Myanmar. And his determination was to translate the Bible into the local language, which was very hard. There was no dictionary. There was no one that could actually teach him. And yet he's set to learning the language. He had a period of time where he was in prison with 3 pairs of iron fetters attached to his body. And he was very concerned about his Bible manuscript that he'd been translating, which was hidden in the earth under his home. His wife eventually brought it to him in prison. It was hidden in a pillow. Well, this man, by 1835, had the Bible translated into the local language there. But not all of these were white missionaries from either America or England. When the message reached the Pacific, for example, many local persons, Polynesians, were very determined to go to other islands within the Pacific to spread the message. An example of this is in 1823, a man, a Polynesian by the name of Papaiha, was determined to get the message in Rarotonga in the Cook Islands. So the mission ship arrived there. The 2 missionary couples from overseas, white missionaries, were put ashore. There was a misunderstanding with a drunken king, which resulted in them being beaten up, all their possessions being stolen, and them fleeing back to the ship. But Papaiha was determined to take the gospel message to those islanders. So it's reported that he said that he would swim ashore, and he called out, "Ko Jehovah tokutiaki te roko o tono rima," which translated means, "Jehovah is my shepherd, I am in his hand." And holding a book with some translations of the Bible in Tahitian, he jumped overboard, swam ashore, and started preaching to the local people. Well, you can't help but admire that enthusiasm. The conditions that these missionaries met were very, very difficult, very primitive conditions. In one country, the missionaries lived in villages where people still practiced cannibalism. And in many cases where the chief died, all his wives were executed at that point and buried with him. So in the midst of these conditions, these men translated the Bible and in many cases used Jehovah's name, not only in the Bible, but in their personal writings. What kept them going? What helped them to go to these distant parts of the earth? Well, a book on the history of the missionary work in the Pacific makes this interesting comment. It says, "Strong faith in Jehovah often overcame fear and despair." What an interesting thought. Well, the obvious question is, were these ones anointed? The answer, obviously, is we don't know. But we do know that Jesus said in Matthew 13, there would be wheat-like sons of the kingdom right down through history. And if some of them were involved with this type of work, I'm sure we wouldn't be surprised. And in the future, we'll no doubt find out if they were involved with that work or not. But what about us today? Well, does it mean we have to all leave our Bethel homes now and go to the most distant parts of the earth? Well, remember in Acts 1:8, Jesus was speaking to people there in Jerusalem, and you may already be living in one of the most distant parts of the earth when you view it from Jerusalem's viewpoint. But the main thing is, wherever we are, if we can reach out and go somewhere else, or whether we can preach within our own territory, if we follow the example of these faithful ones, we'll be sure to try and reach out to persons who have not had the opportunity to hear the truth, whether near or far.